Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our webinar today. The webinar will be starting momentarily. Thank you. Once again, good afternoon, everybody, based on where you are in the world. It's afternoon here for us in Detroit. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar or our virtual lab. Before we start off, you can see on the screen a couple of links that we have that might help you throughout the virtual lab today. I'll be sharing the links later in the webinar as well, so you don't need to jot them down immediately. My name is Chanakya Lokam. I'm the Director for Innovation at Miracle. I work as part of the Miracle Labs team, which I'll be talking about in a minute. Thank you so much for joining our virtual lab today, creating your first hybrid app using Ionic. As it states, the lab shouldn't take more than an hour today. All these virtual labs are scheduled for 90 minutes, but our Ionic lab should be slightly shorter. It's very easy to create apps using the platform. This is part of our Summer of Code initiative that has run throughout June. This is the last virtual lab out of that series. There were labs around IoT, OBD simulators, Node.js, and also big data analytics and Spark as well. If you want to check out any of those replays, they are available on our library at miraclesoft.com/library. A quick review of today's agenda. I'll quickly be introducing you to Miracle and what we do at Miracle. I'll also be talking a bit about our team, the Miracle Labs, and what we do. We'll then be just deep diving into why mobility is kind of becoming mainstay in the enterprise, and what hybrid apps really mean for an enterprise, and why you should actually choose the hybrid route. I'll then be introducing you to Ionic, Angular, and Cordova as well before we move into the actual lab. I'll introduce the lab to you, after which I'll give you some of the links and material that we have available. All our material is available outside in the public space, so you can download it anytime, even after this lab as well. And this lab will be completely virtual, so you can actually follow along with me as I do the lab. At the end of the presentation, we'll go for a Q&A session. If you have any questions, you can post them in the right-hand side chat box, and I'll be more than happy to answer. We do understand that you also will have some questions during the lab as we move forward. And if you do have any of those questions, please feel free to stop us, raise your hand on the right-hand side panel, or send us a quick message, and we will be more than happy to answer your questions. So moving forward, Miracle. Miracle is a global systems integrator. We've been around for over 20 years now. We have 2,000 employees located in almost all the continents across the globe. Where we have offices in the United States in Detroit, where our headquarters is located. We're also present in Atlanta, Cincinnati, and Bentonville, Arkansas as well. We have global delivery centers in Canada, the United States, and India, with our largest global delivery center in South India. One of the main things that we believe in at Miracle is affordable innovation. We feel that in this digital age, it's not enough for customers to just be able to innovate as a luxury. We feel that they should be able to innovate every day within everything that they do. And that's something that we pride ourselves in with our hybrid delivery model. We enable our customers to be able to take advantage of these new digital technologies to become market leaders. We've been around for a long while and have been able to work with many large and small customers as well. We have a very, very large pool of certified professionals, both at offshore and in the United States as well. We pride ourselves in our hybrid delivery model, which helps us to mix on-site and offshore services together to provide not only cost-effective services, but also services that can bring together that model of low-cost innovation. Over the years, we've been able to build multiple accelerator frameworks, which help our customers to adopt technology much more rapidly. All our accelerators and frameworks are available to view on our website if you'd like to take a look at them. Miracle is partners with many large IT firms and many of the large IT giants that are out there, like IBM, SAP, and Oracle, and also Microsoft. We're also partners with some of the newer firms, such as Atlassian, Apache, and Axway as well. So to introduce my team, we're a team of about 40 developers today. We're located across the US and in India as well. Our main focus is around cloud, mobile, API management, Internet of Things, and also DevOps. We all leverage all the real-time exposure that our project teams get from a services standpoint and try and ensure that we can take technology that's coming up today to solve problems that customers might have tomorrow. So that's something that we really believe in, and we provide a new model called RIPS, which is Rapid Innovation Prototype Sprints, and we basically can help customers in terms of assessing the feasibility of technology in their enterprise. So if you have a use case that you want us to check out, our team provides free services for a period of 4 to 6 weeks, within which we'll try and demonstrate the feasibility of the technology. And actually, we can also send up experts to do a workshop or a thought leadership session to check if it fits into your roadmap for the future. So moving into today's lab is going to be completely hands-on, like all virtual labs in the series. It's going to be completely focused on innovation and digital, so that's going to be the focus of our entire lab series. The lab is going to be for 90 minutes, but we might complete earlier than that in today's session. And it's going to be completely guided, which means that I'll be doing it along with you. Every step that I do, you can follow along with me. And if you have any questions, you can stop us in between, and we'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. So before we actually move into the actual hands-on part of the lab, the first step that we'll do is we'll quickly check out and introduce the technology that we're going to be using in today's lab. So even before we go into into talking about Ionic and what it can do for hybrid apps, it's very good to first understand what a hybrid app means. So there's basically 3 types of ways that an enterprise can interact with users in a mobile device. The first and foremost would be a regular web application, which is optimized for mobile runtimes and mobile views, which would run in a browser. There's many frameworks such as Bootstrap and Grid 360 that have come today that enable your websites to become responsive. And I think most of the websites that are out there that are coming up today are all enabled to be able to run on a mobile device as well, such as an iPhone or a tablet. And these web apps, while they are very productive, there are some features that they can't enable, and that's where we talk about native apps, which can actually interact with the OS layer on the mobile device, use functionalities such as camera, contacts, and other functionalities that are available in the native OS of that particular device. These apps are downloaded from the App Store, would be available for users to download and install. So it's more of like a desktop application for mobile devices, where users actually have the device on their phone, and it can be enabled for offline functionality and other stuff. While web apps can also be done in this model where they can support offline functionality, they do not exist in a container of their own. They actually run inside of the web browser, so it does not provide the same functionality as that of a native app. While that can be said, native apps usually use custom languages, so you would have to use something like Objective-C for your iPhone apps. You would use Java for your Android apps. You would use C# and .NET for your Microsoft apps. So with so many technologies coming in, this is where really hybrid apps have really penetrated into the enterprise, because while native apps are very good at interacting with native functionality and give extreme performance, it's really bring a new model of development to the mobile front. And today's enterprise, cost is a very important thing. You want to make sure that you're very agile in terms of your development and delivery of your code and your applications, and you want to make sure that you're able to give great experiences to your customers. So how do you really mix together the benefits of the web application world and the native mobile app world together? That would be the hybrid route, and a lot of customers are. And some of the advantages would be one single code base for all your platforms, whether you're developing for Android, whether you're developing for iOS, whether you're developing for Microsoft Mobile. You would be able to use one single code base, which would mean that all your developers would be just pushing into one single code base, and that would be ported to whatever environment or whatever OS you would want it to run on. Also, you could use wrappers such as Cordova and Xamarin, which we'll be talking about in a minute, to actually wrap your applications together and actually interact with these native device functionalities. So you're still using all your existing web development skills like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and other languages, or whichever language you're comfortable in, but at the same time, you would be also enabled to access these native functionalities. You could access native local storage. You could create offline functionality. So your apps would still be similar to what you're doing on the web front, but at the same time, you would be able to access them as native apps where you would be downloading them from an app store and using them on your device. If you can look on the left side of the slide, you can see actually how a hybrid app looks like. You would have your regular application files, which would be HTML, CSS, JavaScript, anything else that you require as resources. And those resources would be shown to the user using a web view container. This is one of the models to deploy applications, but there are multiple others. We'll be focusing more on the web view apps today. Once it's wrapped in the web view, which is kind of like an internal browser for that application to view it, it would be put inside a native container, and that native container would then interact with all the native features as an interface using plugins available from something like Cordova or PhoneGap. All those native features of those plugins would interact directly with the operating system and would be able to provide those particular functions or features to your mobile application, which is running inside that web view. Other than the regular web view app where you create your applications in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you would wrap those applications using something like Cordova or Trigger.io, which would then enable that application to be run as a native application on your devices. Another type of hybrid application would be a compiled hybrid app. Examples would be using Xamarin and Accelerator. Accelerator was recently actually purchased by or acquired by Axway, and Xamarin was acquired by Microsoft. So you can see a lot of big players are working in that particular space. Apache Cordova is very much used in multiple products, including Ionic, which we'll be talking about today. IBM Mobile First is another hybrid mobile application platform, development platform, which also uses Apache Cordova to wrap its applications. In the compiled hybrid app mode, you would still write your app in a single code base, but you would use a specific language, like Xamarin uses C#, and Accelerator Titanium actually uses JavaScript. So it would be a much more specified SDK. So it wouldn't be exactly like creating a web application and wrapping it inside of a native container. It would be more of creating a very specific kind of application, but you would still be able to use your existing JavaScript or C# skills that you have within your organization to create these apps. So you don't have to learn something new like Objective-C, Java, and you wouldn't have to learn multiple languages. So you're still stuck. You're still within a single language stack, but you would be using a much more constricted model than what Apache Cordova provides. Once you create your application, it then gets compiled instead of put in a container. So the entire code that you create actually gets compiled by the platform into native code. So Java for Android and Objective-C for iOS and so on. So before you actually choose what technology you want to use, there might be some questions that you might want to ask if you actually want to go with the native OS feature, or if you want to actually go with a hybrid app. The first question would be, would your app be using a lot of native OS features? Are you trying to build a game? Are you trying to build something that really needs that graphics or the resources that the native application OS provides? Do you really need all those functionalities? If you have a heavy reliance, or your app has a heavy reliance of those features, make sure that you make a checklist, and if it's very heavy, we would suggest going with a native application. Usually, enterprise applications that integrate with the backend are more data-driven and do not need these heavy graphics and heavy resource utilization and heavy native feature utilization. They might use a couple of native features like camera, contacts, and others, but usually these hybrid apps are very good fit for enterprise applications. Also, do you have enough budget? Do you have enough expertise to actually maintain 2 or more sets of code, one for Android, one for iOS? Could you actually do that? That would also be a very good point to check in before you actually decide on which route you want to go through. Also, decide whether your app really needs to be a mobile app. Does it have to actually run inside a container on the device? Does it have to be downloaded? Can it be just a web app? While mobile apps are great, the initiation time might take longer. You might want to create something much more quicker, maybe temporary. You might want to use just a web app, which is optimized for mobile. That would be a choice as well. If you want to really bring agility to your applications, where it's easier to maintain, easier to change, and easier to actually push and deploy, we would generally prefer a hybrid app, just because it's a single code base, much more easier to update, much more easier to maintain, and since it's technology that we're already using, already accustomed to, it makes it much easier to make changes and deploy. Also, you might want to check what sort of IT landscape you have, what sort of technologies fit in better with you, what sort of technologies your developers are used to. That would be a major roadblock when you're actually trying to develop a native app, because you would have to have Java, Objective-C, .NET, multiple technologies enabled within your organization to go the native app route. So that would be also a good question that you might want to ask your developers and figure out which one you want to choose. So in today's lab, along with Ionic, we'll be using Apache Cordova. Apache Cordova, like Ionic, is open source. So this entire webinar will be based on open source technologies. It's a mobile development platform that allows cross-platform development, which means that you can develop apps using your regular web technologies, but that would be wrapped into a container and then deployed onto a mobile device like a native application. In a sense, if a user is looking at an app, they would not be able to tell the difference between a hybrid app and a native app, unless you're doing something that a hybrid app cannot do, or something that a hybrid app is not good at doing, and then the performance might lag, and a user might really figure out that it's not doing good and it's a hybrid app. This is just an expansion of the diagram that we saw on the previous page. So basically, you create your web app using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, your regular web application. It then uses the HTML rendering engine that Apache Cordova has within the container to actually display it in the web view. You would use Cordova plugins. There are multiple plugins. There are numerous plugins out there that you can use. And those plugins would actually interact with the OS level APIs to actually use those functionalities like the accelerometer, like your network, like your storage, like your camera, and so on and so forth. So Ionic. Ionic is another open source SDK. It came out about a couple of years ago. And it really makes developing mobile applications easy. And one of the first things that you'll see once you start working with Ionic is it feels like it's actually a UI framework, like something like Bootstrap or Grid 360. It isn't exactly a UI framework. That is a part of what Ionic is, but it provides a lot more functionality, and we'll be talking about that in a minute. Ionic gives us a very, very powerful CLI from which you can actually start creating apps, rapidly prototype, scaffold your application so that you don't have to start from scratch, and we'll be using that today to create our application as well. It uses Apache Cordova for its native functionality, and it is an open source framework, and it's based on Angular.
Yeah, previously it came from Bluemix. I mean,
do we have a question? Okay, perfect. So moving forward. As I said, Ionic uses a directive in Angular called ng Cordova, which actually integrates Angular with Cordova to actually bring that native functionality into your applications. So you can use Cordova plugins with that directive, and you can actually bring that functionality into your application. Ionic actually provides the front-end interface and uses Angular, so it's built on top of Angular for all of your data binding. So Angular would be your client-side MVC, and we'll be talking about Angular in just a minute. And Ionic, as I said, it's just not just a UI framework. It provides tooling along with Angular for building actual dynamic applications. It works along with Cordova to create native applications. It also has a very powerful CLI. It has a simulator called Serve, which actually runs a web server on your laptop and allows you to simulate the application. It also provides different tools for prototyping, tools for simulating the app on your, or testing the app user experience on your app on your mobile device. So all those tools are provided by Ionic. So it's just not just the UI framework. There's a lot more that's inclusive within Ionic. As I was saying, Angular provides two-way binding. It's a client-side MVC architecture, which enables the creation of single-page applications. If your developers are already creating Angular-based applications or web applications in your enterprise, Ionic would be a great fit for them to just take that and customize it for mobile. Your Angular code might not exactly fit right away from a web application to an Ionic application, but it's much more easier than actually porting it to something like Android native code or iOS native code. So enough said, let's move into the actual doing part of the lab. So before we go into the lab, let's try and understand what we're going to do in today's lab. We already have a public API from Google that we've taken for geolocation data. We're going to give that API to you, and we're going to basically create an API consumer application using Ionic. This particular application will take a city name, and it'll give back the address of that city. we'll also showcase that API functionality to you in the browser as well, just so that you understand exactly what the API is doing. As I said, we're going to be using Cloud9, which is a web ID. We're going to be registering within Cloud9, and we'll be using that particular account or workspace to create our Ionic applications. We're going to be using NPM and Node.js to actually install Ionic and Cordova in our workspace, and then we're going to create the Ionic app from the CLI, edit it, customize it as we need, and then we're going to simulate it using Ionic Serve. So let's go ahead and kick off. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or send your questions through the chat panel on the right-hand side window, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. To start off, if you go to github.com/miraclelabs/summerofcode16, you'll be able to access our documents around this lab. There's a sample app also there that you can download. Go ahead into the Ionic Lab folder, and you'll be able to see the lab documents that we created. There's a how-to document. So if you go ahead of us during this lab and you want to go ahead and move forward, go ahead and do that. If you want to share it with your colleagues, do that as well. We're more than happy to help you out. Also, you can go to ionicframework.com and check out the other tooling that Ionic provides. We're going to be just scratching the tip of the glacier here in today's virtual lab, but if you want to check out a lot more, you can do that as well. So go ahead and start off the lab. Let's go over to c9.io and go ahead and create your account. It shouldn't take more than 2 to 3 minutes for you. So go ahead and create your account in c9.io, and you will be ready to start doing the lab. From here onwards, I'm going to be working along with you in my browser as well, so that you can see what I'm doing and check it out. So this is the link that I was talking about, github.com/miraclelabs/summerofcode16. As you can see, we have 4 labs out of the series, and you can see a bit more about what the series is all about. Go ahead and go into the Ionic Lab folder, which is at the the second one. Within this lab, we also have cheat sheets as well. So you can go ahead and click on the cheatsheet.md file as well. You can download this repository if you want. Within the cheatsheet.md file, we have all the code snippets and the endpoints that we're going to use, all the commands that we're going to use throughout the lab. So this might be useful for you as well while I'm doing the lab, so that you can copy them from here rather from a PDF. Also, go ahead and sign in, or if you already have an account in C9, sign in. If you don't have an account, go ahead and create one in C9. Just sign up over here. It shouldn't take more than a couple of minutes. I'm going to go ahead and sign in since I already have an account. Okay. Looks like it wasn't allowing me to do that from Chrome, so I went in and okay, so I'll give everybody a couple of minutes to go ahead and sign in to C9, and then we'll go ahead and start creating our application. So we're going to go ahead and get started off. Once you get signed in to C9, the next step will be to create your workspace where you can work. So go ahead and click on Create a New Workspace. Give your project name as Ionic Workspace or something similar to that. This is my SOC workspace for Ionic. That's my description. We're going to leave it as a public workspace, which means that you can collaborate with other people that you want to share your workspace with. And we're going to select the Node.js template, which will actually give us Node.js installed, predefined in Cloud9 in the workspace, so that we can use Node.js and NPM throughout the demo today, or throughout the lab today. So go ahead and click on Create Workspace, and it should start creating your workspace for you. Okay, so once your workspace is created, the next step will be to take the terminal that's there on the bottom. Your screen might be a bit different than what you're seeing on mine. It might be white, so you might want to go ahead to the top and change the colors and stuff like that based on your preferences. This is my preference, so I'm going to use this color. We're going to go ahead and use NPM to install Ionic and Cordova to our command line so that we can start using the CLI for Ionic to actually create our applications. So we can install 2 modules from npm using one command. So we're going to do npm install -g Ionic Cordova. And you can also see this command or use this command from the cheat sheet over here, where you can see the commands as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start the installation. Okay, so as you can see, we've installed Ionic, and if it was installed successfully, you should see a similar message. So let me go ahead and do that. So now that Ionic is installed, we're ready to actually create our hybrid mobile application. So for our hybrid mobile application, before we actually start actually creating the application, let's check out the API that we have to use, which we're going to be consuming in our particular lab today. So go over to the cheat sheet that we used before, and you can see that there's a Google API that we included. This is an open API that's used. You could use the same code that we're showcasing today for the Ionic application for any API that you have, as long as it's authorized to use that particular application. In this particular case, this is a simple GET call, which is open, does not need any authentication of that sort. As you can see, we're passing the parameters at the top. We're passing the address, and we're sending it as Detroit. Let's try that again. Okay, somehow it looks like I copied something wrong over here. But when I click on it, it is working. So this is the API call that we should be getting. As you can see, it has address components, different components, and then within it, it has a formatted address, which basically is what we're going to try and bring into our application today. So let's go over back to our Ionic workspace, and let's start creating our Ionic application. So we're going to do Ionic start. We're going to call our app API consumer. You can call it any other name that you want. And we're going to use the blank template. There's also a tabbed view as well that you can use. There's different templates within Ionic that you can bring in by default. So go ahead and click on enter. And you can see that it starts creating the folder structure, starts scaffolding all the requirements that you need. It uses Gulp and Bower for all your dependencies. It's going to start installing all the dependencies that are required. It's going to bring in Angular for Angular to work with your application as well. It's going to build all the default app.js, index.html files that you need for the application. So your entire application right now is being created. As you can see, it's being downloaded from a Git repository that's already available. And from that, it's going to actually create your application that you want. As I said, we're going to be using Ionic Serve today to actually simulate our application on our local machine, or as is the local machine right now is C9. You can also use something called Ionic View, which actually allows you to actually simulate the app as a real application on the native OS. So if you want to check on Android, you can check on Android. If you want to check on iOS, you can check on iOS. And you would use Ionic View for that. For that, you would need to register. It's still free. We're not going to do that, so go ahead and type N and hit enter. And you can see that it is done. Also, a quick update that it's giving over there. It looks like Ionic 2 beta is out as well, and soon we're expecting Ionic 2 to be out as a full version as well, since Angular 2 is available now as well. So go ahead and click clear. The first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and look at the folder structure that we have. As you can see, you can add plugins in the plugin folder. There's already some plugins from Cordova, such as the splash screen that we can use. You can also see that we have a package.json file, which is maintaining all our dependencies. You can check that out as well. And you can also see that we have a config.xml file. This will be later used for actually converting our application into a native application using Cordova. We won't be using that in today's lab, but if you want to check that out later, that can be done for sure. If you go into the www folder, you're going to see the index.html file, which we'll be editing later. And in the JS folder, you're going to see an app.js file, which is basically your Angular controller that's going to be binding the data to and from your view, which is your index.html file. So now that we have our application folder created, the first step that we're going to have to do is, I'm going to go ahead and close all these. The first thing that we're going to do is open up our index.html file. So our first job will be to actually create the application view that we want. We're going to be creating a very simple HTML page that allows us to input a city name, and we'll be getting the formatted address in return from that. So for that, just for the sake of time in today's lab, we already created the app for you. I'll be explaining the pieces of the view, but if you'd like to try this in detail, you can do that as well. This is a very simple form that we created, and there's much more else that you can do in this app as well. So go ahead into the cheat sheet, and you can see under index.html, go ahead and copy that code, go back into your workspace, delete everything that's existing in index.html, and paste your new code, and then hit Control-S or Command-S if you're on a Mac. And that'll create the code that you want in your HTML page. Just to go through this, the top part, the title, and all the dependencies still remain the same as what the starter code gave us. What we basically did is we created a header at the top, which is using the Ion header class. And basically what we did with that is we gave it a bar com, which is basically a blue color header bar. There's a different colors that you can check out. If you go to Ionic Framework webpage, you can actually see all the UI templates that are available for you to use. We also then defined a footer as well at the bottom. And in between, we've in the Ion content area, we actually told it that it has a header and a footer. So we're defining all of those elements over there. And inside of that content, we actually defined a form over there in the form of list. So we have one label. The first one is our city name, which is basically going to be the form field which we're going to take. And I'll explain the Angular directives in a minute. And we also define another form field which is for placing the address. And we disable this because we will be, from the application side, we'll be editing that form field, and we don't need the user to edit it. So just to check out what this page looks like, go ahead and right-click on your index.html page and click on Preview. And you can see the web page. If you want, you can actually close this, run. And then click on this, and you can open this in a new tab like that. And looks like it looks like there's a small error with the form field that we put up here, which is making it actually disable that form field. So let's check out what's happening there. Looks like the demo gods want us to actually try out what's going wrong. Let's see if that has header affected it. Yep, there we go. So looks like that has header was actually affecting it because it was removing the header, and it didn't know that there was a header, so the city name was actually going under that instead of below it. So now that we have our city name, if you want to check this out, how it looks like on a mobile app, there you go. This is our footer, this is our button, and this is our header, and we have two form fields over here. So let's go ahead and increase that once again. So now that we have our header and footer defined and our actual mobile view defined, the next step will be to define the controller, which is actually going to update this particular form field and take values from this form field and actually call that API, and in turn be able to update our page with the required details. So we're going to go back into our cheat sheet that we have, scroll up, and you'll be able to see the app.js file. Now copy this particular code that's there, go back into the workspace, and go to your app.js file. And now this is a bit more complicated than what we just created, whereas the Ionic HTML page is much more similar to what you're doing using something like Bootstrap. The Angular code would be different from what you're using with regular Java or PHP today, because it's a much more client-side framework. So I'll explain that in a minute. Before we understand what Angular is doing, and while the learning curve is not very steep, the beginning might be kind of hard, but after that it kind of eases out and you'll really understand what's happening. Most of Angular is dependent on the API functionality. So Angular doesn't really bring over HTML code, it just brings over JSON data from APIs that are available and appends that or renders that into the HTML page that we provide. In this case, it would be the Ionic HTML page, which then becomes our application. So as you can see, we defined a couple of directives over here. The ng model directive enables this form or this view to be binded to the model behind it, which is the Angular model that we're providing in the app.js file. So the city.cname is a city object within which cname is the variable that's being defined as the form text field over here. So whatever city name we put, or whatever name we put in the field over here, would come into the city.cname variable. Below that, the second form field we defined in a different way, and we defined it saying that whatever value we put in address, it has to be binded to the view. The reason why it's not put as the same way as the ng model is because in the ng model perspective, we're actually binding it from the model to the view, whereas in the value equal to, we're actually binding it from the view. Sorry, the ng model is binding it from the view to the model, and the value is actually binding it from the model to the view. So whatever happens in the model, it gets updated inside the view over here. The final directive that we're using is the ng click directive, which basically says whenever we click this button, run the get location of city function, which we define in our controller, and the city object has the cname which we gave it. So if you go over to the app.js file, and since we deleted everything that we had and pasted in our new code, you can see that there's a starter controller already available, which basically says start up the entire application and run it with the Cordova plugins. But the controller that we defined is the controller over here, which is called the body controller. And if you could go back into the index.html page and go to the body, you can see that you actually defined the ng app name and the ng controller name for this view. So it knows what the controller is. So if you go back to your app.js, within that controller, we defined a scope variable and an HTTP variable to make our HTTP calls. So the scope variable already has a function written in it called scope.getLocation, where the variable that's being passed to it is the city variable, which we're passing from the other side. So what we're doing is we're creating a new variable called city name inside the scope variable, which is called city.cname, which is basically the object that we're passing to the function. We're taking that particular variable from that object, putting it in the city name variable, and then we're sending that city name variable to the API that we used previously. And the API call, as you saw in the past, when I was showing it, was actually taking the address and giving it the city name, in our case, which was Detroit in the past. We could do anything with that. We are then, once that particular HTTP GET call is completed, we're actually running a then function, which means once it's completed successfully, run the following. And what we're doing is we're basically appending whatever response we get, and I'll explain how we're going through that response, into the address variable. So this address variable, again, we defined it in the scope, which means that it's part of the model view model that we're creating, which means that whatever we append into the address over here, it's going to update that particular value into the address field that we define on our view, which is the index.html page. No more messy documents that get element by IDs that you have to write. You simply just append it into the variable, and it gets binded from the model to the view. Now, the response, as we can see, is coming in JSON format. So let's go back to our API once again. Let's click on it. So as you can see, you have results, which is the main. So let's go back here. You can see that response.data is what the JSON data is from the response, and results is the first thing. And as you can see, it's actually an array of data that's coming through. And while the array has only one element right now because it's only one city, you can actually get multiple values as well. The address, inside of the results, you can see there's an address component. There's a formatted address, and this is what we want to put in our particular field over there. So if you can go back and see, the results array, first item in that array, we're taking the formatted address and we're putting that into the address field that we have in the view. I'm going to go ahead and click on control. I have our controller ready and our HTML page ready as well. I'm going to close the terminal that I created previously. We can go back to our bash terminal that we have. Type in clear just to clear it up. And what you can do is you can now actually run this particular application. You would first have to go into the application, so cd API consumer to go inside the folder. This will take us inside the folder, so you can do ls and you can see all the files that are available. But what we're going to have to do from here is we're going to have to use Ionic serve to actually serve this application. So go ahead and run Ionic serve. We're going to define the port as dynamic, and then we're going to define something called no live reload. This means that whenever we run the command, we don't want it to reload multiple times. We want it to just run. So once you run that, it's going to ask you for what address you want. You could choose localhost if you're doing it on your particular laptop. In this particular case, we're going to type in 1, which is 172.17.54.170, which is basically the Cloud9 address. And you can now see that on the right-hand side, I got a link saying that Ionic Workspace, that is where our code is running. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And it opens up our application. So you can see that it has full address over here, city name. So I'm going to go ahead and type in the city name as Detroit. And if all works well and I click on Get Location Details, we should be able to see the full address in the form field below. Yep, so there you see. The Detroit MI USA address is available in the form field over there. So basically what it's doing is it's going to the REST API, bringing that data, and it's updating it in the Angular model, which is then being bound to the view. And you have a simple API consumer mobile application that you can now actually use Cordova to build into whatever native environment that you want to build into. You can add any functionality such as camera or local storage to this application and then deploy it onto any of your users' devices. Just to make this fun so that you understand how it's working, let's actually go ahead into, let's stop. You can use Control-C on a Mac or a Windows, it's Control, and clear this to clear it out. Let's go back to our results. Instead of the formatted address, maybe we want the lat and long to come in. So let's go back to the API consumer, the address, and you can see that geometry is where the lat and the long exist. So within geometry, you have bounds, and within bounds, you have northeast, and within northeast, you have lat. So what we'll do is let's go back to our Ionic Workspace, and let's call the address as lat is. So instead of formatted address, let's do geometry dot bounds dot, let me check it out again, bounds dot northeast dot lat. So that's our latitude, and then let's add our longitude as well, and long is plus. Let's copy this, paste it here, and let's say long. Let's just verify that that is the exact one. Northeast bounds geometry lat long. Oh, it's only LNG, so let's change that and save it. So basically this should, instead of just putting the address or the formatted address, we're going to put the lat and the long here. Now, so that you understand what we're actually doing on the view as well, let's not just limit ourselves over here. Let's create another variable, scope dot address equal to, and we'll put something over there, and let's change this to coordinates. And back to our index.html, let's leave the address field as is, but let's copy the address field and place it in as a new field. And let's call this coordinates. Let's put the placeholder as latitude and longitude of the address. And let's put coordinates over here as well. So basically what we did is we created another form field, and inside of this form field we're actually defining it, saying that whatever we update as a coordinates inside of the Angular model, you can then take those coordinates and actually put them into the view over here, which is the text field that we defined. So go back to app.js, and what we're going to do is inside of the address field we're going to take the old code that we did. So we're going to do results dot, and we're going to do formatted address. Let me check that that is the correct. Yep, formatted address. So we're now going to put both of those fields into the form that we want. So let's go ahead and run this once again. Let's do Ionic serve -p $port no live reload. And it should start automatically since you already selected what your IP is. Click on Ionic Workspace, and you can see a new form has been created with the full address and the latitude and longitude as well. Let's go ahead and hit Detroit, hit Get Location Details, and you can now see both the formatted address and the latitude and the longitude are coming. Just so that you know that I'm not faking it and this is actually a real live API, let's check out Delhi as well, which is in India. And you can see you have New Delhi coming in as well. That's a city. And let's also try one more thing. Let's try San Jose. And you can see that that particular city is coming as well. So once your application is completed, you can then port it or deploy it onto your native devices using Cordova. While that isn't part of this lab, we would definitely be more than happy to help you out in the future if you have any of those questions around those. So with that being said, that wraps up the lab for today. If anybody has any questions or if they would like us to repeat any of the steps, please feel free to put your questions on the right-hand side chat panel, and we would be more than happy to cover those particular aspects for you. Okay, perfect. Looks like we don't have many questions. Great session by me then. Perfect. So if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at our marketing team, marketing@miraclesoft.com, and they'll forward the questions to us, or you can send them to innovation@miraclesoft.com, and we would be more than happy to help you out. You can also go to our Git repository at github.com/miraclelabs. There's multiple labs that we deploy over there that you can check out, and in the future we'll be putting out some of our demos there as well, so that you can check out those demos also. With that being said, let me quickly conclude. At Miracle, we're dedicated to your digital transformation. If you have any questions around health check workshops or labs that you want us to conduct at your premise, we'll be more than happy to come over and help you out. We'll also provide 4 to 6 week free lab pilots as part of our RIPS program within the Innovation Lab, so feel free to reach out to us on that as well. With that being said, thank you so much for coming to our webinar today. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to spend it with us. We hope that the lab was helpful for you, and if you have any questions, once again, feel free to ask us. Thank you so much, and have a great day.